Please, I'm too sick to walk, she whispered, her voice barely clinging to the cold night air, and the rancher felt something inside him jolt like a horse rearing in fear. He didn't know her name, didn't know why she was alone in the middle of the road at this hour, didn't know why her thin frame trembled as if she were moments from collapse, but he knew one thing. If he didn't lift her now, she wouldn't survive until dawn. The wind roared across the open plains like a warning cry, pushing dust across his boots as he crouched beside her limp figure. Her skin felt cold, not the kind that hinted at winter air, but the kind that whispered danger, fever, and a body losing its battle. She tried to push herself up again, her fingers digging weakly into the gravel, but her strength evaporated instantly. When he slid his arms under her, she tensed for a moment, as if she expected pain instead of help, and that single reflex set his mind spinning with unanswered questions. He carried her to his truck, the storm clouds swallowing the moon as if they wanted her hidden from the world, and when he placed her gently on the passenger seat, she collapsed sideways unconscious before the door even closed. He sped down the empty road toward his ranch, checking her every few seconds to make sure her chest still rose. Each faint breath felt like a borrowed chance at life. Her hair was damp with sweat and her lips a frightening shade of pale blue. He turned the heater on full, cursing softly under his breath at whatever had driven her into the night like this. When he reached the ranch, he rushed her inside, the old wooden door banging open behind him. He laid her on the couch, grabbed every blanket in reach, and wrapped her tight as he stoked the fire high enough to chase away the creeping cold. She opened her eyes only once, barely a flicker, her voice trapped between sleep and pain as she whispered, "Don't let them find me!" "Please." Then darkness swallowed her again. Chapter 1 ended without him realizing anything had ended at all. It felt more like everything had just begun. Some storm, some secret, some danger that had stepped straight into his home and curled up unconscious, under his roof. He sat beside her through the night, brewing broth she was too weak to drink and wiping her fevered forehead with a cold cloth that warmed too quickly against her burning skin. Every time she flinched in her sleep, every time she whimpered as if reliving a nightmare, his jaw tightened and questions churned in his mind like a herd spooked by lightning. Who was she running from? Why was she so scared? And why did he feel like he'd known her fragile voice long before hearing it for the first time tonight? When dawn broke, a streak of gold light slipped across her face, revealing bruises beneath the fever flush, faint but unmistakable. His breath hitched, fury rising like wildfire. But before he could lean closer, her eyes opened, full of confusion and panic. She pushed herself up, wincing sharply, her gaze darting around as if expecting walls to close in on her. "You're safe," he said softly, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. She stared at him, her breath shallow, eyes shifting between gratitude and terror. "Where am I?" she whispered. "My ranch," he answered. "Found you on the road last night. You were burning up. You said you were too sick to walk." She swallowed hard, the memory flickering in pieces behind her expression. Then she whispered the words that made his chest tighten, in a way he didn't understand. "Thank you, but I shouldn't be here. If he finds me," her voice broke. She looked away, pulling the blanket closer to herself like a shield. He didn't press, not yet, though every instinct in him wanted to demand who had hurt her. Instead, he said, "You're staying until you can stand without trembling. Then we'll figure out the rest. Whoever he is, he'll have to go through me first." Her eyes widened at the conviction in his tone, and for a brief moment, her fear faltered, just enough to reveal the exhaustion beneath it. Her fever worsened by afternoon. She collapsed when she tried to stand, her legs giving out as if her strength had been swept away by the night wind. He caught her before she hit the floor. This time she didn't pull away. She simply whispered, "I'm sorry," her voice trembling like fragile glass, and he felt something inside him shift. Sorry for being sick, for existing, for needing help. What kind of life made a woman apologize for collapsing? He carried her back to the couch and forced her to drink a little broth, supporting her head as she swallowed painfully slow. He stayed close, unwilling to leave her side long enough for her to disappear or collapse again. As storm clouds gathered outside, she finally gathered enough breath to speak. "I didn't mean to cause trouble," she murmured. "Trouble?" He scoffed softly. "You almost died. That isn't trouble. That's someone needing help, and I help people." She looked away again, her lashes trembling. Not everyone would. He knew that was true. And whoever she had run from, whoever she had feared enough to flee into the cold, sick and alone, wasn't one of those people. By late evening, her fever broke. Sweat soaked her hair and the blanket, her breaths slowing into something steadier, though still fragile. Exhaustion pulled her into a deep sleep at last, and he finally allowed himself to breathe. But as he watched her sleeping, something else hit him harder than he expected. He didn't want her to leave. Not because she needed help, not because she had nowhere else to go, but because something about her, the vulnerability, the strength buried beneath fear, the way she clung to life despite everything, had carved its way into him without permission. He cleaned up quietly, checked the doors twice, set his rifle by the window just in case. The ranch had always been a quiet place, too quiet since he'd been living in it alone, but tonight it felt different, like someone had brought the echo of a different world inside with them, one full of danger, secrets, and something he hadn't felt in years, purpose. As the fire crackled low and she breathed evenly, he whispered to himself, "Whoever hurt you, they won't touch you again." And something deep inside him knew it wasn't a promise. He was making out of duty. It was something far more dangerous than that. The second day began with her waking in confusion, her eyes scanning the room with the instinct of someone who'd spent too long running. She sat up too quickly and groaned softly, pressing a hand to her temple. He stepped toward her with a cup of water, and her eyes snapped toward him in alarm before softening into hesitant recognition. "You stayed?" she whispered, almost disbelieving. "You needed someone to," he said. "Besides, you still look like a stiff breeze could knock you over." She almost smiled. Almost, but then fear clouded her face again. "I can't stay here," she whispered urgently. "If he comes looking, let him," the rancher cut in, something fierce flickering in his voice. "You're safe here." Her throat tightened visibly. "You don't understand," she said, her voice cracking. "He always finds me." Those words cut through him like a blade. Whoever he wasn't going to find her here. Not without going through hell first. When she tried again to stand, he helped her gently. And this time she didn't resist the steadying hand on her waist. She managed a few steps before her knees buckled, and he caught her again, holding her close so she wouldn't hit the ground. For a moment she leaned into him, resting her forehead against his chest as she whispered, "I don't know why. You're helping me." He swallowed, the truth that rose instantly, because he couldn't bear the thought of her collapsing alone, because her pain stirred something in him he had buried for years. Instead, he simply said, "Because no one should suffer alone on a cold road at night. Not on my land, not anywhere." Her breath shuddered, as if the simplicity of kindness was foreign to her. By afternoon, her strength returned enough that she could sit outside on the porch, wrapped in a blanket as she watched the sun slip lower in the sky. He sat beside her in silence for a while, letting the warm wind brush across them. Finally, she spoke. "His name is Dean." The rancher stiffened. She continued, her voice so soft it nearly dissolved into the wind. "He wasn't always like that, but when I got sick, he said I slowed him down, said I was useless, and when I tried to leave, Her voice broke, a tremor shaking her entire frame, and the rancher clenched his fists against the sharp anger rising inside him. "You don't have to explain the rest," he said gently. "I know the type." She nodded weakly, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. "I just wanted to disappear," she whispered. "I didn't think anyone would find me." "I found you," he said, his voice steady. "And I'm not letting him anywhere near you." The words hung between them, carrying a weight neither of them fully understood. She looked at him with an expression that seemed to waver between disbelief and a fragile flicker of hope. For the first time since he'd found her, she didn't look like she was planning to run. For the first time, her shoulders loosened slightly. For the first time, she looked alive. But just as peace seemed to settle over the ranch, a truck engine rumbled in the distance. The rancher stood immediately, his instincts snapping to attention. Dust kicked up along the dirt road leading to his gate, growing thicker, closer. She went pale instantly. "It's him," she whispered, her voice shaking like a leaf in a storm. The rancher stepped in front of her without hesitation, positioning himself between her and the sound of the approaching engine. His jaw set like stone. "Stay behind me," he said quietly. "Whatever happens, you stay behind me." The truck stopped at the gate, idling. A man stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, his boots crunching on gravel with the swagger of someone who believed the entire world belonged to him. He scanned the ranch, his eyes cold and unblinking. "You see a woman come through here?" he shouted. "Sick thing, weak, can't get far." The rancher didn't move. "Turn around," he called back. "No one here wants your trouble." The man laughed, a harsh, sharp sound. "I'm not leaving without her," he shouted. "She's mine." Something inside the rancher snapped. He walked toward the gate slowly, deliberately, the air charged with something dangerous. "She's not yours," the rancher said, "and she's not going with you." The man took a threatening step forward. "You got no idea who you're dealing with." "I don't care who you are," the rancher replied, his voice low. "You hurt her. That's all I need to know." What happened next unfolded faster than thought. The man lunged. The rancher moved with a controlled force that came from years of work, grit and survival. A struggle hard and brutal erupted in the dust. She watched with her hands pressed to her mouth, tears streaming as she whispered, "Please don't die. Please don't die." And finally, after what felt like hours, though it lasted only seconds, the rancher pinned the man to the ground, forcing him face down until his resistance collapsed into the dirt. "You come back here again," the rancher growled, "and you'll regret it." The man scrambled back to his truck, swearing and shaking with rage, but he did not look back as he sped away. The rancher stood in the settling dust, breathing hard. When he turned, she was already running, weakly, stumbling but running straight into him. She threw her arms around him, trembling against his chest. "You risked everything," she whispered. "For me." He held her tighter than he intended, his voice rough with truth. "I'd do it again," he said. "Every time." And something shifted in that moment. Irrevocable, undeniable. Not because he had saved her. Not because she had needed saving. But because two lives that had been falling apart in quiet, lonely places had collided on a dark road, and neither one of them would ever be the same again. By morning, as she slept safely inside his home with the soft rise and fall of peaceful breathing, the rancher looked at her and understood what he'd been trying to ignore since the moment he lifted her off the ground. She hadn't just changed his night. She hadn't just changed his ranch. She had changed his life, completely, entirely, and forever.